Politics. Oh, politics. Why are you the way that you are? Politics has seemingly taken over every area conceivable of life today. There's no separation in politics between culture, social issues, media, entertainment, pretty much any form of information, and it's all a big mishmash with politics. You know, it used to be, and maybe some of you even remember this time when you just didn't really talk about politics and religion. You could throw that in there with just people you'd meet, just acquaintances, even coworkers. A lot of times you wouldn't have those kinds of conversations. Maybe with close friends, but even then, sometimes it just wouldn't come up. You didn't bring it up. With some of your close friends, you just wouldn't do it because you know it would lead to those really difficult conversations, and you just didn't want to do that. You know what I mean? Some of you remember that. And so here's the thing with politics. It's so easy to get completely swept away. And honestly, I really do think that that's by design. There's 1,000 different little conversations and big conversations that you can end up having in regards to politics. You know, modern politics is meant to make you feel like you are instantly part of a group, right? Part of a group with an identity. But the cost is that once you identify with that group, then this other group over here, they become your enemy, like really your enemy. And that enemy on their side is meant to feel and identify with that group over there. Everybody is intended to so identify with the group that they're with that anything that the other side might say doesn't really matter which side it is. That's seen as immediately the enemy, but then at the same time, the more that you identify them as the enemy, the more you feel included with this other group. So politics has taken on this completely different animal than it used to be. It used to be something that wasn't that important, that you didn't have to really talk with people about, to now seemingly that's the first thing people want to talk about. It's kind of weird. But at the same time, it's easy to see why politics has become that, because with the type of media that we normally consume and with the information that people is really exposed to, you know, that it's ripe for manipulation. Every form of manipulation that you can think of is meant to keep people engaged in politics and divided from the other side in a way to keep people from actually coming together and having real conversations, because oftentimes people who would have the real conversations would realize there's not as much different as they think there is. And on few key issues, if they just had a conversation, then they would know where the other person is coming from. And that's from both sides. And you wouldn't have this strict divide that they had. The reason you need to have the divide is because they are doing this to manipulate people on purpose, because this is the massive means of control. And the thing that I really wanted to specifically introduce, I'm not going to be able to really go too in depth into all of the different things in this video. It's going to be multiple videos that will follow, is what I think are the two chief columns of identity. Big general sort of umbrella terms that are used for the right or for the left. You know, it used to be, you know, capitalist and commie and whatever. They used to use all those different terms. But today it seems to be progressives, conservatives. These are the two big groups. And there are subgroups within, but those are the two big umbrella terms that are used. And I think if we maybe look at them from a certain point of view, we see maybe it's not what we really thought it was. A really basic sort of definition for, we'll start with conservatives. For conservatives, you generally have people who feel as though they have something or have been given something or have attained something, and they want to preserve it, right? They just want to put a big old hug around it, and they want to keep it the way that it is, right? And I think that we can understand that. If you think that you have a thing that's worth preserving, worth fighting for, you want to keep that thing together. You want to keep that thing pristine. That's sort of the perspective that conservatives generally have. And you can fill in the blank with whatever that is. It's they feel as though there's something that they need to conserve. So there's certain issues where people get together and say, we want to protect this thing, right? Fill in the blank. And that would be, in its essence, sort of the little seed that represents conservatism. The progressives, or those who are part of that side of things, they would see that they are not where they want to be, that the things that they have, they want to move on from to go somewhere else. They want to progress to, using that word, they want to progress on to either, it's always that thought of like greener pastures, or for most people, it's a certain specific set of things. We want to move forward with things. And not all progressivism feels the same. There are some people who feel like, we need to go into this exploration sort of a thing. And we need to go into this social progression. We need to go through this sort of class kind of system and progress and help people move up. And so there could be a lot of different things that they might say we need to progress onto something else to go from where we're at to somewhere else. And that's what they see as their main objective. They want to move on from where they are to somewhere else. Super general, right? That's a super general sort of estimation of two sides. Now, where they start to oppose one another is when you have someone who's conservative who says, this is a thing that I want to preserve, and someone else says, that's the obstacle from me progressing. And then you can flip it around, where someone says, someone who's progressing and say, you're in my way, I want to move on to something else, and someone says, well, you're going to trample through this thing that I want to preserve on your way to progress somewhere else, right? Now, this is all kind of big general language. But where the sticking point really is the fact that conservatives sometimes forget what they're preserving and why they're preserving it, right? It's almost like they need to go back, open the box to say, what is this? Let's assess this. Let's look at this. Is this something that I should be preserving? Is this something that is worth preserving? Or they forget the things that they're really fighting for. And it's sort of like the person who like destroys their own home to keep an intruder out. It's like, what was the point of that? You just ruined your own house to keep out an intruder. So for conservatives, that's sort of where you can slip to, is you forget what you're preserving or why you're preserving it. For progressives, what they would generally say is that where I'm at, I don't like to be, or I want to move on to somewhere else. Well, here's the problem. You may not actually know where your final destination is. It's sort of like someone taking a vacation trip, and I don't know if you're like this, where you'll plan out different stops throughout your journey, right? Different places to stop and to look at something, or see the country's biggest ball of twine or whatever that is, or different places to eat. So for a lot of progressives, they're thinking about those things along the way without knowing where they're actually going. They don't know what the destination is, and so if they don't know what the destination is, then they're just moving in some sort of direction. They're ultra malleable, because once you sort of leave and you set off on these sort of like, we need to progress on with these ideas, very vulnerable. And so you're going to stick to that identity even more, like we're the travelers, we're going somewhere else, or we're moving on to greener pastures. And if you don't know and you're just wandering, that's really unstable. That's something that you can all of a sudden become completely engrossed in, is just the journey without the destination. That can become really dangerous. So why is this important? Well, think about this. If progressives have a particular goal in mind, someplace that they are trying to get to, and these places along the way, once they finally attain something, so let's say that there's a goal, let's say, and I'm not going to even use an example, they want to move on towards a certain direction. Well, let's say they finally attain it. Well, if they now have attained a certain thing, what do you think they're going to do at that point? Once you've attained it, then you'll want to protect it. You want to make sure that you don't lose that thing. So all of a sudden, once you have reached your end and you have the thing that you were looking for, or one of the things you were looking for, one of the things you're trying to progress onto, all of a sudden, you become a conservative. Then the conservatives, if they actually look back at what they're protecting and they go, you know what? this thing's not really worth it anymore. Or I don't even know why I'm protecting that particular thing. And all of a sudden they go, we should move on from these different things to something else that's more meaningful for us to actually protect. And all of a sudden they're moving on from a particular position or particular place. So then guess what the conservatives become? They become progressive. They are progressing onto a different destination. So now we get to the core of it. Progressives, conservatives, what it really is, it's a direction. I always kind of made this joke when contextually appropriate. When you call the middle of the country the Midwest, that is the dumbest thing you could call it, because what is that? It's the Middle West. It's like you're on the way somewhere. You're not quite west, but you're in the middle of it. It doesn't make sense to me. But it's sort of like if your destination isn't defined, then all of a sudden it becomes very subjective. And that's the problem. Because you can say, I'm a conservative, I'm a conservative, I'm a conservative. But what if you move on from that thing that you were conserving? Are you still conservative or are you progressive? See, it's subjective. It's subjective to where someone is at. And this is why it's important. If you don't understand how those two pieces work, the conservative perspective versus the progressive perspective, you might actually have two people who are both looking for something that they might agree on, and they'll fight about it. They will fight because you're the enemy, because this is my group and you're in the other group. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a way to manipulate. And most of the things that we see in politics today are simply to manipulate. And if both sides don't understand that, and they're both made to go back and forth because they identify with one side and they're fighting the other side, you know what that's called? Total control. Now here's the thing. I think this is the easiest way to control a group, is to pit them against each other, because they're going to be in that fight. And if you make it something that they really care about, they're in that fight to the end, right? Think about this. It is easier to manipulate two groups that way, socially, manipulate two groups that way politically, than it is to spend the time, the money, and the manpower to keep them under control in an authoritative sort of sense. It's cheaper to just manipulate. It's easier. I think that's where we're at. My goal with this video is not to make anyone upset. Like, that's not the goal. The goal is not to upset people. What I'm hoping is when you start to understand that where you are in your politics and where someone else is in their politics, if there's not a real, and I really mean it, a real discourse between the two sides, you both actually might be fighting each other over something that you both agree with, something you both want to work on. Or there is a easy little compromise that would actually take care of the issue, and you're just not seeing it because partly you don't want to. Because if all of a sudden, so some people have that identity where they're a progressive or they're a conservative. If they agree on some point with the other side, that becomes unsettling. That starts to break the manipulation. That starts to break the programming for someone else. And they say, am I really part of this group anymore? If you start to identify with your enemy, are you still part of that group that you thought you were? People get scared. And this is where we have to help each other to say, you, individual, are a human being. You will have inherent value, and we need to care about each other. Maybe it starts with, you know what? Let's try to detach the politics. Let's talk about something that we care about, right? Maybe it's photography or a hobby of some kind. Maybe it's a particular thing. Maybe you're into nerd culture. It's like, hey, comics. We can talk about comics just in general, or maybe it's movies, or maybe it's fashion. I don't know. Fill in the blank. Or maybe there's something where you can connect, where you can say, you know what? There are things that I agree with you on that have zero to do with politics. You know what that means? We are both human beings who can interact with each other without the manipulation. If we can get to that point, we can start to have real conversations and not fake conversations. And I would say, I'm not going to single out any kind of thing, but I would say a lot of the things that happen on Twitter, for instance, are fake, because you have only 140 characters to try to convey an idea. So you know what they end up being? Just zingers. Just a zinger. Someone says something and you want to do a zinger that'll sting, and that means you won. No, you didn't. You're just agitating, right? It's like driving by somebody and just yelling something out the window. You're not adding to a conversation. I know everybody's like, oh, it's the the marketplace of ideas or it's the public square. No, it's not. It's people yelling at each other. And sometimes it's just random stuff. And you're like, oh yeah, okay. And you're just like yelling out like, I like that. I don't like that. I hate you. I love you. Like all these different things that don't matter because it's fake. It's manipulation. So here is your challenge. All right. Try to find someone who you know you disagree with concerning some sort of political statement, a political stance. Maybe you know for sure that person's progressive, or you say, I know for sure that person's conservative. Have a conversation that has nothing to do with politics. Make it about anything. It could be about if it's like a restaurant or there's some sort of like that sort of setting, like at a pub, talk about beer, right? If you're at the movies and you're talking with a group or whatever, just make it about the movie. Find a way to have a conversation with someone else, and when you end that conversation, say, thank you for the good conversation. I really appreciate it. Make it about anything other than politics. The more we start to do some of those things, the more we'll start to break down some of the things we make up about the other groups to make them our enemy. And once we start to break some of those things down, we'll start to say, you know what? Not everybody is a big old jerk on the other side, whichever side it is. And this sounds like, are we all going to sit down and sing Kumbaya? No, but let's have real, normal human interactions again. Let's start to do those sorts of things, because if at any point the guano hits the fan, guess what? We're human beings again. And we got to help each other, and we care about each other. And we shouldn't interact with someone to say, hey, now what's your politics? I want to know if you're my enemy. Nah, we got to get back to where we see humans having inherent value again, and we interact with them on that level first before anything else. And you know what? Maybe we get back to the point where it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the politics is, because I'm not looking for an enemy. You're not looking for an enemy. Instead, I'm looking for a genuine interaction and, dare I say, maybe make a friend. If you like this little video, I invite you to hit a like, subscribe, whatever buttons are appropriate for wherever you're seeing this. And like I always say, Pilgrim on, my friend. We'll see you out there.